This has to deal with Tulsi Gabbard, Iran, and how you got a lot of neocons trying to push Tulsi Gabbard to alter U.S. intelligence on Iran's nuclear weapons capabilities. So, give it up for Glenn Greenwald for calling this out. I think no matter where you stand politically or socially, we should be against any kind of military actions right now because that region is already burnt to a crisp. You have Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. I mean, what more do you need? What more do you need? War with Iran, great. You want to know who has to take care of that? The USA. And Iran is different than Iraq. Okay? And I think before anyone else gets hypercharged about further military actions, we need to ask ourselves, is this something we can deal with? Is this something our country can afford? Can we walk away from this? Because right now, as a nation, as a people, I think we're war weary. Okay? We have been dealing with war for so many years now, decades now, since 2001, and there's no end in sight. I mean, I'm 40 years old. Is it going to be another 20 more years, 30 more years? When I'm on my, if I make it to my 80s or 90s, which I press X to doubt, am I going to be on my deathbed wondering, oh, we're still in Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran? I remember when I was a young boy and that war first started. Is that what I'm going to have to say? Is that what I'm going to have to say? Because I don't want to say that, and neither do any of you. So huge shout out to Glenn Greenwald, because there's a lot of people who got a hard on for war, and you know what happens when people got a hard on for war? It means they got money to make. Check out Unusual Whales. Look, find out how your favorite U.S. congressman or woman, U.S. senator, Democrat, and Republican made a financial killing in 2022 and still are to this day.
One of the points Dan Caldwell made is that Trump absolutely is committed to the diplomatic resolution. He does not want to cast aside the possibility of diplomacy in pursuit of war, even though people like Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham, all the usual suspects, Mike Waltz, Marco Rubio, are encouraging that. He's saying, I think we can do a deal that will result in assurances that Iran will not get a nuclear weapon. And a lot of the hardest core neocons, the most fanatical Israel loyalists, are going insane because the idea of stopping Iran's nuclear program is the pretext. What these people want is a change in the regime in Iran. They want to go back to installing the Shah of Iran's monarchy that they installed back in 1954. And the Shah of Iran's son thinks he's the legitimate ruler of Iran. They want to put him back into office.
And that didn't go wrong the last time. For those who don't know, before the Ayatollah took over, the Shah of Iran ran the show, right? And you're thinking, wow, Iran had a monarchy? Well, no, because that monarchy was gone. Because before the Shah came back, there was a national government in Iran. And in the 1950s, after the Truman administration, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Churchill, MI5, CIA, and big oil companies decided to launch a coup to remove said national government because that Iranian national government, wanted to use the resources, for their own country, for their own people. But that was going to be a no bueno. They were their own democracy, their own republic, trying to set something up, but that's not what happened. And the Shah took over, and everything went terrible. And in turn, when you create such economic disparity, oppression, sadness, it gives rise for people like the Ayatollah to come around. And that's what happened. We're making the same mistake again. Only this time, it's on the internet.
They want to go back to installing the Shah of Iran's monarchy that they installed back in 1954. And the Shah of Iran's son thinks he's the legitimate ruler of Iran. They want to put him back into office. Dan Caldwell called him the ultimate fail son. You may remember the Iraq War, the exact same strategies. They had a bunch of Iraqi exiles who had no connection to the Iraqi people, hadn't lived there for 40 years, people like Ahmed Shamaldi, who was going to float in and govern Iraq once they got rid of Saddam as a U.S. puppet, a puppet of neocons, a puppet of Israel, just like the Shah of Iran was. That is still their plan. That is the real goal, to scare Americans about Iran's nuclear program as a pretext for changing the regime of Iran. Here's Mark Dubowitz from one of the most neoconservative think tanks in Washington giving up the game because he's scared that Trump is going to succeed in diplomacy. He says, quote, "The Islamic Republic is weaker than ever, hated by most Iranians," meaning we're going to be welcomed as liberators, same thing we heard in Iraq, "hammered by the IDF and Mossad. Its terror armies, air defenses, missile production capabilities are in ruins. Never a better time to dismantle its nuke program and finish off the regime. Will another POTUS blink?" Meaning, will Trump be too scared to send Americans to go die for a regime change war in Iran, notwithstanding the utter and complete and total failure of regime change wars in the Middle East over the last 25 years, at least failure from the American perspective, not necessarily from the Israeli one. There's also an attack on Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence because she has been giving.
Now, here's the thing. Tulsi Gabbard has on few occasions said about Iran's nuclear weapons capability that there was non-existent and more or less going up against the narrative. Now, throughout the final year of the Biden-Harris administration, especially in mid to late 2024, there was this massive push to try and get the U.S. to be more on board with more retaliatory strikes in Iran. Now, thank goodness that didn't happen. But now we have the ever-increasing pressure of these next couple of years, where there's now talk for more escalation, more conflict. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, that's, I don't know, the loss of innocent lives, men, women, and children, an entire region being engulfed in the flames of absolute total war, an entire region in which there is no way for there to be an effective ceasefire or peace, an entire war that will drag the United States in on it, also putting our U.S. personnel at risk, embassies at risk, assets, money, treasury, lives, all of this at risk as the madness continues on and on and on. This is where empires go to die. This is how empires fall. Ongoing, continuous wars. The story's all the same. Check out Fall of Civilization podcast. You'll see it. It's always the same. It's always the same. And it's not some foreign army that destroys the empire. The empires always destroy themselves from within. And you have an administration. We've had previous administrations lead us into this pathway of destruction, Democrat and Republican. So voters, when I say that your politicians don't have your best interests at heart, they don't. Because there's money to be made in war.
One. There's also an attack on Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence because she has been giving intelligence to Trump, saying that there's no good intelligence that Iran actually is moving toward a nuclear weapon, which U.S. intelligence has been saying for quite some time. And there's now an attempt, and this should sound very familiar to anyone who understands the Iraq War, on the part of neocons to target and coerce Tulsi Gabbard into altering the intelligence to say the opposite, that Iran is moving toward nuclear weapons to be able to justify the war. Like Dick Cheney used to go to the CIA, like Paul Wolfowitz had his own stovepiped information from the CIA. Lots of people in the CIA were saying there's no evidence Saddam had nuclear weapons, let alone biological and chemical weapons. And they went there and insisted and pressured intelligence officials to give the intelligence they wanted, that Colin Powell then destroyed his reputation by going to the UN to presenting, to justify the war. That's exactly what's happening here. Here from the journal American Greatness. DNI Gabbard must reverse, quote, stupid U.S. intelligence on Iran's nuclear weapons program. U.S. intelligence still claims Iran has no active nuclear weapons program, despite stockpiles of near weapons grade uranium and evidence of covert weaponization efforts. So they're saying the U.S. intelligence community, Tulsi Gabbard, have to change the intelligence from what they have, which is that Iran is not pursuing nuclear weapons actively, to say that they are, so that we can have a regime change war against Iran. Here is neocon Mark Levin who cited this article today, said, very important. Please read to the end. Red flags are everywhere. Can't say we've not been warned.
Okay. Okay, so now here comes the big question. This came out April 18th, 2025. Is the Trump administration going to stand firm and be against the war in Iran? Because to Trump's credit, the only big thing that he did, he did a lot of stupid things in the Middle East, but there was that assassination of that Iranian general in 2020, being the herald of doom and things to come for that year alone. I think we all remember fondly 2020 and all the madness and pressure and depression that followed with it. But this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to have a narrative to push for war. Last I checked, Trump running in 2024 was talking about ending the war in Ukraine and in Gaza, getting people back on their feet. You want to know what bleeds a country dry and cause the populace to go into further poverty? Ongoing, continuous wars. We got money for war. We don't got money for the people.
What's going on here is as dangerous as it is manifest. These are the people who have led the United States into the most disastrous foreign policy debacles, the most destructive wars based on lies for decades. You can debate why they have an interest in doing that, but what we know for certain is it is not in the interest of the American people. It doesn't produce prosperity or security for the United States. In fact, the opposite is true. When you go around constantly invading other countries and meddling in other countries, you produce a lot of anti-American sentiment that leads to things like 9/11 attacks and other terrorist attacks, again, by people who are extremely angry that you're bringing violence to their country. It unites all sorts of countries in a coalition in unison against the United States, who, as Dan Caldwell pointed out in that great interview he did with Tucker Carlson, ought not to have anything in common. Why should Russia and China and Iran and North Korea be in an alliance against the United States, given their grave differences? It's because we forced them into one. We're turning the world against us with all of these constant wars that are in the interest of some people, the people demanding it, but certainly not in the interest of the citizens of the country who pay for it or who go fight in them. And the pattern should be so immediately recognizable to anyone who understands not distant history, but very recent history.
All right. So what can we take away from this? Well, I'm stressed out beyond belief. I'm furious beyond belief that we have a party, a Republican Party, that was hyping up all this stuff and, really wagging its finger at the Biden-Harris administration about war. Yet here they are now. You got some neocons that are trying to push Tulsi Gabbard to change the narrative, to change the song and dance, to change the tune, to change the mood. If you're not furious by this, you should be. You have a administration now that is being pushed by outside forces, and let's face it, a lot of these politicians, to quote good old Representative Thomas Macy, who once said, everyone in D.C. has an AIPAC babysitter. Everybody in D.C. has an AIPAC babysitter. So that means there's going to be a push, not only in Congress, not only from social media, not only that from establishment media, people talking about why we need to have a war with Iran. Because the war in Iraq went so swimmingly well. What could go wrong? And that is, look, in October of 2023, right after October 7th, I said all what this war is going to do is lay down the foundations for the next war. But if this continues to escalate, how much more are we going to get involved? What's the end game? What's the final conclusion? Because all this pain and suffering, you have one side shooting the other, people dying, loved ones dying, innocent collateral damage, quote unquote collateral damage. I mean, there's going to be so many open wounds that there's no way it's going to ever heal, become gangrenous and infected with maggots. And that's what's going to happen. So if Trump is really dead set, I hope there's peace talks. But maybe I'm being suspicious here. Maybe I'm being overly paranoid. But I see this playing out in a way in which somehow these peace talks get derailed. And then all of a sudden it's one side versus the other. And everyone's holding their collective breath. Because what happens then?